For years, aviation experts wondered why Sweden seemed ready to give Canada access to 88 Saab Gripen fighters, almost as if Stockholm was offering far more than a normal aircraft sale. On the surface, it looked like a simple proposal. But behind this deal was a deep strategic plan that connected Arctic security, independence from superpowers, and Sweden's long-term vision for its defense partnerships. The real story begins long before Canada announced the need to replace its aging CF-18 fleet. Swedish planners had already been studying Canada's vast geography and the extreme conditions of the Arctic. They realized that Canada faced the same challenges that Sweden had mastered: harsh winters, remote bases, and massive areas of responsibility. To Sweden, Canada wasn't just a customer. It was a potential partner that truly understood northern warfare. And the Gripen E was built exactly for that environment. So when the Canadian requirement for 88 fighters finally came out, Sweden didn't respond like a typical seller. Instead of saying, "Buy our jet," they made an offer that shocked Canadian officials. Sweden proposed deep industrial cooperation, open access to technology, local production opportunities, and even shared upgrades. It was not a sale. It was an invitation to join the entire Gripen ecosystem. Why would Sweden do this? Because their defense philosophy has always been based on independence. Sweden believed that strong nations should not rely on a single superpower for every upgrade, repair, or software update. Canada, by contrast, had long been restricted by international regulations, especially with American aircraft. The F-35's mission systems, for example, cannot be freely modified by other countries. Sweden saw this dependency as an opportunity. If Canada chose the Gripen, it would instantly become the largest non-European Gripen operator, strengthening both countries' defense industries. What surprised analysts the most was the level of access Sweden offered. They were willing to allow Canadian companies to assemble many of the jets, maintain the engines, and handle sensitive systems. No other fighter supplier had ever opened its technology this widely. It seemed almost unbelievable. Why would Sweden give away decades of research? The answer was Arctic strategy. Sweden wanted a capable ally in the north, one that could share training, deployment routes, and even emergency support in extreme scenarios. Then came the biggest surprise. Sweden promised full software sovereignty. Unlike the F-35, the Gripen allows countries to modify threat libraries, integrate their own weapons, and update electronic warfare settings without foreign approval. For Canada, this meant complete freedom to adapt its fighter to new dangers. For Sweden, it meant expanding a global network of operators who could help develop new tactics and upgrades. This is why many describe Sweden's offer as giving Canada the Gripen. They weren't pushing a product, they were offering aerospace independence. Swedish officials believed that Canada could become part of a long-term partnership built on trust, not restrictions. But there was another strategic motive. Sweden knew that in a future crisis, having Canada operate the same aircraft would give Sweden access to safe bases, shared training, and reliable reinforcement options. This wasn't charity, it was smart planning. By the time Sweden completed its pitch, Canadian analysts were stunned. No other nation had ever offered Canada this much control, this much technology, and this much respect as a defense partner. The Gripen proposal was not just about 88 jets. It was about a vision of two northern nations building an independent security network across the Arctic. But this bold offer also triggered pressure from major global powers, because it threatened the dominance of existing fighter programs. And that political pressure would soon become the most important factor in Canada's final decision. As Canada's fighter replacement selection grew closer, whispers began to circulate in political circles. The idea of Canada choosing the Gripen over the F-35 made certain allies extremely uncomfortable. The United States had spent over $1 trillion developing the F-35 program. If a major NATO nation like Canada walked away and picked Sweden's fighter instead, it would challenge the global narrative that the F-35 was the only modern option. And that possibility sent shockwaves across Washington. Behind closed doors, American diplomats began quietly explaining to Canadian officials that interoperability, intelligence sharing, and deep integration with US systems would be easier with the F-35. In other words, the pressure had begun. Meanwhile, Sweden doubled down on its offer. Documents later revealed that Sweden had proposed training cooperation, shared testing grounds, Arctic deployment support, and even future joint upgrades funded by both nations. For Canada, this was unprecedented. For Sweden, it was strategic long-term survival. But things took a dramatic turn when analysts discovered something astonishing. If Canada had selected the Gripen, it would have allowed Canada to build a fully sovereign fighter program, one not tied to any superpowers restrictions. Canada could add new weapons without asking permission. It could upgrade its radar. It could tune its electronic warfare suite. It could export parts. It could even join Sweden in developing future Gripen variants. This level of freedom is rarely allowed in modern fighter contracts. It was, in many ways, Sweden giving Canada the keys to complete air combat independence. So why wasn't this story widely reported? Because such a deal would have created geopolitical consequences. The United States was concerned that giving Canada full software access and advanced electronic warfare capabilities outside F-35 oversight might weaken centralized control. Defense contractors feared losing billions in revenue. And some NATO members quietly worried that if Canada chose Gripen, other nations might follow, triggering a domino effect that would break the monopoly of the F-35 market. Meanwhile, Sweden remained calm. Saab and the Swedish Ministry of Defense knew their jet didn't need flashy marketing. The Gripen E was already proving itself, cheaper to operate, easier to maintain, faster to turn around, and brutally effective in contested electronic warfare environments. Its ability to land on small roads, swap engines in 60 minutes, and operate with tiny ground crews was something the F-35 simply could not match. During the evaluation phase, Canadian pilots who flew the Gripen simulator reportedly praised its cockpit layout, wide-angle display, and intense electronic warfare capabilities. Some even said the jet felt like fighting with a hacker's toolkit in the sky. But politics began to overshadow performance. The pressure to align with the US decision grew stronger. In the final months, Sweden made one last move, perhaps the most shocking of all. They offered Canada long-term cooperation on a future fighter program beyond Gripen. This meant Canada would not just fly Swedish jets, it would help design the next generation of Swedish combat aircraft. This kind of offer has never been made by a Western nation to Canada. It was unprecedented. It showed the level of trust Sweden placed in Canada. But even that wasn't enough to overcome the geopolitical gravity surrounding the F-35. When Canada eventually confirmed its intention to purchase the American fighter, many insiders felt a deep sense of loss. Not because the F-35 is a bad jet, but because Canada walked away from becoming a fully sovereign air power nation with a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Yet the story doesn't end there. Years later, analysts now openly admit the Swedish offer was one of the most generous, strategic, and partnership-driven fighter proposals ever made. Some even call it the deal of the century that never happened. And when people say Sweden gave Canada 88 Gripens, what they really mean is that Sweden offered Canada something far more valuable than aircraft: total independence, full control, and a long-term Arctic alliance built on trust instead of restriction. Today, the shocking truth is finally being understood. Sweden didn't want Canada as a customer. They wanted Canada as a partner. And in a world where alliances are shifting, technology is guarded, and great power politics dominate defense decisions, Sweden did the unthinkable. They offered Canada freedom. Not many nations do that. And that is why this story still echoes in defense circles, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest deals in history are the ones that never get signed. As Canada moved closer to choosing its new fighter jet, the Swedish Gripen proposal began attracting quiet attention from powerful countries. The idea that Canada might select a non-American aircraft created tension in diplomatic circles. The United States had invested heavily in the F-35 program, and a major NATO partner choosing the Gripen would challenge the perception that the F-35 was the only modern choice. This concern became the starting point of political pressure behind the scenes. While this was happening, Sweden continued offering Canada a level of cooperation no other nation dared to give. They promised shared research, access to future upgrades, and the ability for Canadian companies to become long-term suppliers for the Gripen program worldwide. For Canada, this meant new jobs, new technology, and the chance to build a fighter fleet that it could maintain entirely on its own territory. For Sweden, it meant a massive strengthening of its defense industry and a reliable partner capable of operating in the Arctic. Canada's evaluation team studied not just performance, but the long-term independence that the Gripen offered. Engineers were impressed by the ease of maintenance, Pilots appreciated the wide-angle display and the aircraft's strong electronic warfare capabilities, and analysts noted that the Gripen could operate from remote northern strips that the F-35 could not. The aircraft could be refueled, rearmed, and relaunched with a small crew, allowing Canada to defend its enormous territory without relying on large bases. But the real game-changer was software freedom. Sweden told Canada that it would have full control over its mission data files. This meant Canada could add new weapons, adjust threat libraries, and update the jet systems without needing foreign permission. This level of independence was unheard of in modern fighter contracts. To defense experts, this showed extraordinary trust, almost like Sweden was inviting Canada to become a co-owner of the entire Gripen concept. However, this offer also created geopolitical concerns. Some Canadian officials worried that choosing a non-US aircraft could affect intelligence sharing or limit joint operations with American forces. Meanwhile, several countries watching the deal feared that if Canada chose the Gripen, other nations might follow. That possibility alone increased pressure around the final decision. As the selection deadline approached, Sweden made one final and surprising move. They proposed long-term cooperation on future air combat technologies. Beyond Gripen, Canadian engineers would be allowed to collaborate on new radar advancements, electronic warfare research, and next-generation fighter concepts. No other Western nation had ever offered Canada such a deep technological partnership. It was clear that Sweden did not want Canada as a customer. They wanted Canada as an equal partner. Inside Canada, opinions were divided. Those who supported the Gripen argued that it offered freedom, low operating costs, Arctic capability, and unmatched industrial benefits. Those who leaned toward the F-35 focused on political alignment, interoperability, and the advantage of joining a program already adopted by many NATO allies.
In the end, politics outweighed technology.
When Canada signaled its choice of the F-35, many experts felt that Canada had turned away from what some called the greatest fighter offer in its history. But the Swedish proposal remains one of the most open, generous, and partnership-driven defense deals ever made. Even Canadian officials privately admitted that the Gripen offered something priceless: complete sovereignty over Canada's air power. Today, analysts still look back at the Swedish offer with admiration. It wasn't just about fighter jets. It was about a vision: two northern nations sharing technology, securing the Arctic, and building a future free from heavy restrictions. The truth is simple. Sweden didn't try to sell Canada a jet. Sweden tried to empower Canada, and that is why the legend of the 88 Gripens Sweden gave Canada continues to echo across defense circles long after the final decision was made.